Hello everyone, you are watching Everything You Should Already Know, a video presentation by myself, Aaron Butler. This is a brief reminder of the human condition. I made this presentation to share everything an awakened human being should be expected to know. This presentation is meant to bring as many people up to speed as fast as possible regarding all of the required information everyone should know if they choose to not remain ignorant heading into the future. This presentation contains lifetimes worth of study, and it's compressed just into minutes worth of information. So this is a lot of my research, probably a decade's worth, compiled into one presentation. This is by no means the full extent of this information. This is just a teaser and an initiation into some of the most hidden topics and some of the most concealed topics of the human condition. I speak factually about a lot of nuanced philosophical topics, and it usually triggers the ego of people who see things more in gray areas. I speak objectively about a lot of topics. And this is a summation of all the information a human should be expected to know. So this is going to be difficult for some people to hear because, I'm telling people what they should be expected to know. And granted, a lot of people do not like to hear what they should be expected to know. We cover the darkest aspects of human consciousness, and it will trigger those with the strongest stomachs. I'm telling anyone right now, if you have a weak stomach, or if you're not ready or not mature enough to listen to someone who knows what's going on, then you should please go somewhere else and find someone who delivers things a little softer and a little less informal. I've made this presentation to be as formal as possible. However, that's not usually my style, and I put this together to formalize my delivery method. So, for anyone who believes that they already have all the information, they should think again and or go somewhere else. So I'm asking everyone who's watching this right now to watch it all or not at all, because this isn't something that you want to half do. This isn't something that you want to have half of the information. You want to have the whole picture and see everything as zoomed out and eclectically as possible. So anyone who can sit through this presentation with a receptive mind will find timeless solutions to humanity's actual problems, and a path to true freedom will be revealed to them. So without further ado, let's get into it. Where are we? So we are on Earth. That's a good guess. I think that's where we are. Some people speculate on the size and the shape of the Earth. I think that we can all agree we're here. And we're in the solar system, right? So we're the third planet from the sun. That's where we sit. And around the solar system, or outside of the solar system, we have our galaxy, which is surrounding a huge black hole, apparently. Then we're in the universe. This is something as zoomed out as we could try to imagine. The universe is an expanding container that provides the womb in which all of existence as we know it grows in, is birthed from, and returns to. So everything we know is here. So estimates say that there may be between 200 billion and 2 trillion galaxies in the observable universe. That's quite a lot. The universe is the one change. From every atom to every living being, the universe is perpetually organizing or deorganizing into more or less complex systems of energy. So this is the one change. Things are either moving forward into progress, or they're regressing into less complex forms of energy. So evolution is the expansion, unfolding, and growth of order, complexity, consciousness, and life. Involution is the contraction, stagnation, and decay of complexity, consciousness, and life. These are the two forces. This is the one change. It's the interplay between these two forces. So these forces of syntropy and entropy. Syntropy is the order, creation, expansion, etc. Entropy is towards chaos, towards destruction, towards contraction, simplicity. In order for a universe to exist at all, there must be pre-existing laws and conditions to govern the possibilities and structures of and within a universe. I know that's kind of a mouthful. Essentially, In order for a universe to exist, there must be a law in place previously to control and govern what is going to happen within that universe and how a universe can even come to being. So this implies laws that are non-physical, invisible, and must exist before a universe would universe. This is what we call natural law. The universe and everything within it is governed by natural laws. Let's look at the words natural and law. Something that exists inherently without human perception, creation, or alteration. That's what is meant by natural. It means that we didn't create it, we didn't invent it. It doesn't change whether our perception changes. A law is an existing, immutable, and binding condition that cannot be changed. This is a law. This is what science calls a law. It can't be changed. It exists. So natural law, therefore, is an existing and binding, immutable condition that operates inherently in the universe without need of human perception, creation, or alteration. That's natural law. Natural law is one name for the invisible, unchanging laws that govern the existence and possibilities of the universe, consciousness, life, and the consequences of its behavior. Natural law has been called God's law, moral law, spiritual law, the law of cause and effect, and karma. Natural laws are invisible just like breath and are only observed by how they animate the universe. This is what I mean by spiritual. This is the animative force of the universe. That's what spirit is. So, this animating character of natural law is called spirit, which means breath or breathing. Spirit refers to the source which animates the universe and is responsible for the cyclical expansion and contraction, creation and destruction of the universe. It's speculated how the universe comes into being, how it recedes from being. Many people in scientific spaces and esoteric spaces believe that this is the gradual expansion and contraction of the universe. It's been called the Great Breath or the Breath of God. So part 2, what are we? Another perplexing question that I'm trying to simplify here. So what are we? We are life. Life is the ability of a being to grow, respond to stimuli, adapt to the environment, and evolve to a higher degree of complexity. That's what we all know of life. It's a simple explanation of life. Or a simple definition, rather. Consciousness is the ability of a being to recognize patterns and meaning with respect to events taking place both within oneself and in the realm in which this self exists and operates. That is a simple definition of consciousness. We see things, we respond to them, we assign meaning, we can notice patterns, we can be aware of this stuff. Intelligence. Intelligence is the degree to which a being can recognize events, understand meaning, adapt to situations, and evolve to a greater complexity than before. The simple definition of intelligence. We are the conscious man. We are the conscious man. Mankind, born from, existing in, and returning to the universe, must be and is imbued with the same breath which animates the universe. So we are spirit. We have the same spirit, the same animation. We are reflected from the universe into us. We can only be the universe. We exist in it. We come from it, and we go back to it. So therefore, the same animation of the universe exists within ourselves. Very simple. I hope that's very understandable for most people. Consciousness. A human is the spirit that animates the universe, inhabiting a limited consciousness in order to learn, grow, and evolve to higher states of being. I hope that this is getting explained simply enough for most people to understand. The universe has a spirit. It is an animating force, and that animating force exists within us. Since we are born into and existing in and returning to the universe, we have to be imbued with the same spirit that the universe is. We cannot be outside of the universe. All the possibilities that exist in the universe exist within us. And if we have consciousness, The universe must have consciousness. It must be programmed into the fabric of the universe beforehand. And the universe, all the atoms, all of the galaxies, everything abides by a certain pattern, a law. It all exists by law. So do we. It is all aware of itself. Certain ingredients of the universe must interact with themselves. They must be programmed in their awareness of themselves. It's a form of awareness that it has that we possess as well. We have a higher state of awareness because we are the universe evolving. The consciousness is evolving into a higher state of being. Okay, so how are we here? Another complex question that I'm going to try to give a rudimentary explanation and a rudimentary look at the basic science, the basic understanding. This is by no means complete, and you will find a lot of holes in this explanation of how we are here. But I'm looking at just the basic surface level that I hope everyone can agree with and understand. And I will point out any contradictions or gray areas or mysteries along the way according to our time. I'm trying to blast through this stuff, and I hope that people can follow along. So what most people refer to as evolution is actually the interplay of syntropy and entropy, which is a dynamic exchange of energy. Evolution is not just one force. There's a opposing force which presses against evolution, which is involution. I should have added that to the slide, but syntropy and entropy is evolution and involution. This is the method which evolution can actually take place and occur. And if it weren't for the perfect exchange of evolution and involution, there would be nothing at all, and there would just be pure chaos. There would be no order. There would be no balance of these two things. So first we have the expansion of the universe. Remember, this is how we are here. The expansion of the universe. Remember, it happened according to law. It had to have had law written, or, excuse me, existing laws beforehand, before this rapid expansion of the universe. We have the formation of the galaxy. As galaxies start to form. The sun starts to form, and then we have a solar system, right? Simple. This is just the progression of sequence of events, very simply, very broken down. 4.5 billion years ago, Earth forms. Big ball of hot molten rock and gas. And then the Earth cools, the gases condense, the oceans start to form. So then in the ocean, single-cell organisms appear 3.5 billion years ago. Many people do not agree on how single-cell organisms appear in the ocean. Some people believe that chemicals mixed in the right way and became life forms. Some people believe that asteroid impacts, whether deliberate or coincidentally, just happened, and life appeared in the oceans. And there's the formation of algae, so lots of single-cell organisms working together. Then we have multicellular organisms 2.5 billion years ago. Invertebrate species and coral, etc. Bony fish and some plants on land 400 million years ago. So we're powering through this. We're getting to it, right? We have from the formation of single-cell organisms to some bony fish. You have sharks. You know, there's plants coming up onto shore and onto land. Amphibians, reptiles, large insects, and forests 300 million years ago. So now we have the first life forms creeping up onto land. You have the tetrapods, etc., crawling up onto land. We have an extinction event that kills 90% of sea life and 70% of land life. So that's a huge extinction event about 251 million years ago. Dinos, mammals, birds. 150 million years ago. Another one that people widely speculate on the existence of these creatures. I'm not really going to get into that. I don't have much of an opinion on that. I don't think that it really matters as much when it comes to you know, what we're focusing on today. Another extinction event 66 million years ago. This is the one that wipes out the dinosaurs, apparently. And, we know these extinction events have happened. The first one we believe was, the extinction event up top was a carbon based. Apparently, the gases on Earth got so toxic that everything was wiped out. I think it was volcanic eruptions, something of that sort, if I remember correctly. Next one was asteroid impacts 66 million years ago. We have warm-blooded, after these cold-blooded creatures, reptiles, etc. The dinosaurs got wiped out. Apparently, this left a lot more room for warm-blooded creatures. You have little marsupials and rodents existing. Then you have the early primates like lemurs. They exist 50 million years ago. So we're getting into the atmosphere that we closer to what we have today. So we have apes and old world monkeys 30 million years ago. We Much of science believes that this is our ancestor, our primate ancestors. This is often speculated. This is what many scientists believe to be, it could have been the first human bloodline essentially, because of its possibility for upright walking and small teeth. Still looks like a primate, obviously. You have Australopithecus afarensis 2 million years ago. So we have 30 million years ago all the way down to 2.1 million years ago. Still looks like an ape or a monkey. Still has the same skull of an ape or a monkey. However, Australopithecus, they believe this was a human ancestor because of the way that the hip was positioned, and it could walk upright. Many of these things still has the long arms, existed in the trees, but could walk upright. You see that skull taking shape, maybe. Then 2.4 million years ago, just after Australopithecus, you have Homo habilis. This is the first Homo species. Still looks like an ape. You have many different versions of what Homo habilis looked like, but there's chiseling stone tools. This is the first, you would say, hunter-gatherer, essentially an ape still, or a monkey. You have a somewhat man-looking interpretation of what they look like, but if you look at the skull of Homo habilis, it is still very similar to the the Tacadensis, cadensis. Don't remember exactly how you pronounce it. So you have that going into 1.4 million years ago with habilis. You have Homo erectus on the scene just shortly after that. This is the first sign of, in this era, that's about 1.8 million years that these creatures were around. Still have the ape skull. Still have the the monkey characteristics, outdoor body frame, elongated skull, no forehead. But these creatures possessed fire. We attribute these creatures to the control over fire. They were making cupules and rocks at this point in time, whether those cupules were for boredom, art, counting. It's still speculated on what those cupules were used for. And then we have Neanderthals. So this is 400,000 years ago to 40,000 years ago. Very similar skull shape, huge brows, no forehead, long rear brain, long rear, elongated skulls backwards rather than upwards. You have the classical triangle rib cage, a huge thick skulls, but these beings were upright. looking a lot more like humans. Uh, Looking a lot more like humans, still very different than modern humans. And then around the same time, you have Homo sapiens. These beings all existed. Homo erectus, Neanderthals, and sapiens existed within the same time. They all walked the earth together. Um, However, vastly different skeletal systems. You can see just the huge difference between the formation of body in the Neanderthal and the Homo sapiens. Homo sapiens share no bones identical with Neanderthals. There isn't a single Neanderthal, Homo erectus, or habilis bone that we have. It's an entire restructuring of the anatomy at the same time that we're walking the earth. So you can make the assumption clearly and infer that this is not necessarily a long, slow crawl of evolution that many people would have you believe. I know there's a bunch of different directions that evolution goes. But Neanderthals actually possessed the same. The male Neanderthals possessed the same Y chromosome as Neanderthals. So if we were going forward, it would say we would technically most likely have the same Y chromosome as Neanderthals. It goes backwards. So some people say it was interbreeding. However, all the male Neanderthals Y chromosomes that they have tested are sapiens. It is most likely that Neanderthals possessed the same ancestors as Homo sapiens. So it doesn't mean that it came down. It means that we have the same lineage, essentially. But it's just the males. It's not the females. And so, an interesting note, you can see just a huge forehead, huge pointy chin. Totally different. These are thin bones. These are very thick. You have a splicing, a telomere to telomere fusion event that took place around this time. Usually happens with genetic engineering or some type of radioactive event that fused the number 2 chromosome from Neanderthals and primates into humans. This is an insane anomaly, and also the material that was left over from this splicing event is gone, as if it was taken out deliberately. So it's like the extra material that was left over from this fusion event is gone and missing. Very anomalous event that took place that science still cannot explain properly. So now we have Homo sapiens. We're getting into it. With a newfound curiosity, we seek to direct our awareness towards other abstract realities, towards truth, consciousness, meaning. But first, we must overcome threats and animal motivations. So, Homo sapiens, going from Neanderthals into sapiens, we were gifted or somehow given, somehow evolved to have an insane intellect, an insane correlative abstraction of reality. We can remove ourselves metaphysically from our environment and speculate and infer and introspect deeply on what we are, who we are, how we got here, where we're going, and how to get there. So this is a huge event that took place, and science still cannot explain the link between Neanderthals and Homo sapiens. So let's get into part 4, tribal societies. Man garnered relatives and like allies in numbers for security and protection. In a group, individuals could defend themselves against predators and other threats, fostering safety and communal protection. Humans began to stabilize their environment and realize they possessed an interconnectedness with the world around them. The consciousness permeating man and nature are governed by an invisible, all-powerful spiritual force, which must be hearkened to. The most notable aspect of tribal culture was shamanism. The shaman was one who sees in the dark and would lead the tribe out of the darkness of ignorance and chaos towards the light of knowledge and order. So shamanism often revolves around animalistic beliefs where spirits and ancestors inhabit the natural world. So whatever humankind was, whatever Homo sapiens are, it existed, this consciousness permeated throughout the natural world. Shamanism is a tradition of knowledge comprising practices of reaching altered states of consciousness in order to contact unseen intelligences existing in the spiritual domain via music, dance, endurance scenarios, extremes of temperature, or ingestion of hallucinogenic compounds. So they would try to contact different intelligences, which they were intelligent and they had a deep connectedness with nature, and they believed, or rather understood, that intelligence was a part of nature. They would try to interact with this during states of physical exhaustion, or they would sometimes consume hallucinogens or psychedelics or even poisons to reach these altered states of consciousness, which the ego was drawn back and they could see past themselves and into nature. So moral education. So they began revering the great force that rewards correct behavior, providing life, and punishes wrong behavior, taking it. So moral and spiritual education of the young becomes the most important tool for ensuring long-term survival of the tribe. They recognize that there were laws, moral laws, that existed throughout nature, and they identified behavior that would ruin survival. Certain behaviors would take away survival. Certain behaviors would promote survival. This is the first semblance of morality. Many people believe that these tribes were totally immoral and had no concept of right and wrong, and I think it was quite the opposite. These beings had very stringent moral education. They knew what true morality was. They recognized that true morality, the difference between right behavior and wrong behavior. So right behavior manifests freedom due to its alignment with natural law, these natural forces. As morality increases, freedom increases. They knew wrong behavior. It manifests slavery due to its opposition with natural law. As immorality increases, slavery increases, or a lack of freedom increases. Right behavior does not result in the theft from sentient beings. It is moral. Right behavior harmonizes with natural law. It is correct, truthful, expanded the tribe's consciousness. It led to freedom. Wrong behavior does result in the theft from other sentient beings. So it was stealing. It opposes to natural law. False, not truthful. Wrong behavior contracts consciousness and leads to enslavement or a lack of freedom. So these are long-term traits. It took them a long time to see this, to see the effects, to study it. This is the true science that the tribes found. To break it down simply, these are some of the behaviors that right behavior entails and wrong behavior entails. Right behavior is an infinite possibility, but only excludes 7 behaviors. Right behavior is any behavior excluding murder, assault, theft, rape, trespass, lying, and coercion. You can do anything, just don't do these things. The tribe knew it. Don't do these things. They result in extinction, war, theft. And any time that they would contribute to murder, assault, rape, theft, trespass, coercion, or lying, they realized that that came back to them. It came back to them threefold. So anytime they took part in those behaviors, it resulted in bad results. So along with moral education, rites of passage in the formative years served as a way to progressively temper the young to be morally resilient in the face of challenges on the path to enduring survival. These would serve as transformative and transitional experiences which tested the young's ability to apply knowledge in the real world. So these rites of passage were tests and trials to see, to encourage the young and to teach them how to apply the deep knowledge, the teachings in the physical world. These were often seen as kind of extremes of mental fortitude and strengthening, and many people in our society would think that these are barbaric and crude. However, they knew that survival was of the utmost importance. However, you had to survive properly. You had to survive morally, and that is how they tested the resilience. You must be able to make the proper decisions under every extreme that came to you. Rites of passage were methods of assisting a tribal initiate to unfold a deeper understanding and integration of themselves and the universe or tribe they are a part of. Initiation was seen as the end of an old identity and beginning of a new identity that has a deeper integration with nature and the tribe. So these tests were a way to propel consciousness into a deeper understanding, an integration process. So initiation rites in tribal societies served as a mechanism through which the young were brought into deeper membership within their communities. These rites marked the end of previous duties and the beginning of new responsibilities, rights, or social roles. So these initiations were ways to consciously consciously help the young and help the member of the tribe unfold themselves into deeper teachings and to more responsibilities. So let's get into the steps of initiation. The first step of initiation was no lying. Lying was viewed as a severe betrayal to the self and the universe. This served as a guiding principle to ensure that an individual's judgment could be trusted by his own self and the tribe in times of crisis. A person who was not honest with themselves could not be honest with the tribe. Honesty was seen as an utmost virtue. In order to trust yourself, you must continuously be honest with yourself. You must be honest with yourself about yourself. You must be honest with yourself about the situation. Otherwise, you could not be trusted. You had to be trusted with life and in death. In all of these situations, you must not lie. No dreaming. The initiate was to have a clear vision of the true self and the reality in which it operates. There was no room for delusion or pretending that reality was not the way that it actually existed. Difficult truths of the self and its circumstances must be admitted and faced directly in order to be corrected. These initiates were not allowed to spend time dreaming. They were allowed to use imagination to envision problem solving, to envision a better world, to envision technology, to envision better ways of doing things. But they were not allowed to dream or tell themselves that something was not the way that it was. They weren't allowed to pretend or live in a state of delusion, a state of contradiction with themselves. They should know that morality and reality is objective, and there should be no dreaming about what morality is or what reality is, because they had to have a perfect grasp of how to behave and when to behave in what manner. The third step in initiation was knowing how to think. This is the first instance in these tribal societies. They identified what many people now call the trivium methodology. This is ancient pre-ancient, prehistoric ways of thinking. The initiate must know how to think. The first step of thinking is available knowledge. The initiate must collect knowledge. They must be able to see what knowledge is in front of them and available. Thinking first began with available knowledge. This includes objective, external information, and internal sense data. They must have a very clear understanding and possess a vast amount of information of the outside world and of their inside world. They must be able to collect this information in as quantitatively and qualitatively as possible. In thinking, they must take in an understanding of the knowledge they have taken in. This includes the ability to attribute values, see contradictions, compare and categorize data, recognize patterns, see contexts, see correlations, etc. Thinking involves taking in the information, but also taking in enough information in a quantitative and qualitative fashion so that they can organize this information. They can make decisions properly. This is a very crucial role in understanding. They had to be able to find loopholes, find problems, compare vast data sets, compare it with reality, compare it internally, compare it externally, bounce information inside and out and left and right to be able to see properly and make the best decisions. They must understand the information. The next step that was essential was the application of this understanding and knowledge. This is the third step, is putting knowledge and understanding into action, or wisdom. Wisdom, or the lack of wisdom, is dependent on the quality and quantity of one's understanding and knowledge. So your action was dependent on the information you took in and how well you understood it. This is the full trivium method: thoughts, emotions, and actions. This is how the tribal initiate was able to make the best decisions. They took in as much quality information as possible, and therefore as much information as possible. That way they could find out the quality of as much of this information. They could see the quality of this information. They could understand as much of this information as possible. Then the third step was applying it. This is the scientific method. They must apply. They must apply the knowledge and understanding. And then after this, guess what inevitably took place? There was the results of this information. The manifested reality. This is the end of the scientific method, was finding results, getting this information out into the world and reflecting it, documenting it, saving it, telling it to others, sharing this information. Manifested reality was dependent on the quantity and quality of one's knowledge, understanding, and wisdom. So the results that appeared into the world was dependent on how much and how quality of information they took in, how well they understood it, and how well they applied it. This is all the trinity of how they would hone in their behaviors and their knowledge, their data set, and share this information with others. This is the essential trivium from every religion, every tradition that has came to be from this hundreds of thousands of year old method. Let's get into step 4. Step 4 was living in the present moment. They had to devote their attention and care to the present moment, which allowed tribes to be aware of deep spiritual truths which transcended time and space. Present moment awareness aided individuals in dissolving ego identifications, looking past superficial differences to see the true self and the nature as they are. They noticed that when they took themselves away from the internal dialogue, when they took themselves away from planning, took themselves away from thinking about the past. Many people believe that these tribes were deeply connected to the present moment. They had a deep connection with nature because their life was essentially simpler, and they were able to conquer fears and animal drives much quicker because they didn't have the distractions that and the complexities that come with further societies and further civilizations. So coming into the present moment was a way to let go of themselves and become one with nature, to become aware of deeper truths rather than the superficial truths that brought them into a state of mental chatter. Step 5 was taking physical action. Responsibilities in the tribe required physical action in one form or another. They knew that this is the third part of the trivium method. They must activate the physical body. They must apply the knowledge. They must take care of what needs to be taken care of. Activating the physical body was the final step in fulfilling obligations and ensuring that which needs to be done is done. It was essential that every individual contributed whatever way they could. There was not many excuses. If all you could do was collect berries, that's what you did. If you were the big strong guy, you would apply what you knew and who you were to what you could do. If you had a very compassionate or deeply spiritual connection, you would hone your shaman spiritual abilities. If you had an extreme intellect as well as the physical abilities, maybe you would become a leader or become a chief, a tribal chief, if you will. These steps of taking action were a way of doing what you could do, applying what you knew, applying your skills, applying your knowledge, applying the individual. It was not seen as, they weren't as telling people what to do. They would hone in the skills of the individual for what they were good at, and that's what they would apply it to. Let's take a look at step 6, which is very crucial. The initiate would have to take care. An essential component pervading tribal culture is an emphasis on care. This is the care for truth, the care for wisdom, the care for nature, the care for life, and the care for death. They took care of things. They had a deep connectedness. They valued knowledge. They valued nature. They valued life. They valued death. They valued existence. They saw themselves as doing their best to assist nature, to grow nature. They were not consuming nature in the way that we see it. They were seeing as with any taking from nature that they did, they saw it as incredibly valuable to give back to nature and assist nature. Care was the transcendence of the material realm and seen as the force of creation itself. They viewed nature as a caretaker. They viewed the laws of nature as a caretaker. It took care of them. If they abided by nature, nature would take care of them. So these are the 6 steps of initiation. Let's get into conscience. So this care that they took in nature, this sympathy and empathy, they felt it. This care allowed early humans to work together in a highly efficient manner, and it ensured harmony with nature. This empathetic aspect of consciousness is called conscience. Conscience means knowing together, which unites humans with other sentient beings. Very important that conscience is paid attention to. Conscience is an internal compass and a tool which helped people in the tribes determine which behaviors they should or should not perform. A defining trait in humans is that they can hone with practice their ability to perform right behavior and have an internal compass. This conscience was a tool that could be sharpened, and it allowed them to practice the ability of empathy and to see deeper into their connectedness with nature and their connectedness with life itself. So let's get into something that these tribal members discovered, which is essential to understanding humanity and where we are now. Early humans made a startling discovery in the realms of morality. Occasionally, there would be tribal members or rival tribes who have all of the features of a human being except the critical human ability to facilitate emotion, conscience, or fear. Today, this is called primary psychopathy. They found out that no matter what education they gave their members, no matter what they did to make allies, inevitably there would be an individual that did not feel, that did not have empathy. They did not and could not exercise conscience. This is a very mysterious entity that they discovered. They could not identify with this individual. This individual had to feign what they were. So when it comes to social interaction and emotional behavior, psychopaths rely purely on mimicry and acting. They are adept at reading others as they are not distracted by internal emotions. The tribes learned that these people were cunning, they were charming, they knew how to fit in very well because their survival depended on it, and their motives, their pure existence depended on them pretending. So, with an absence of conscience, a hallmark of humanity, the psychopath has no moral compass, no guilt, no shame, fear of punishment, or due regard for the survival of any other living being than itself. These entities, whatever they were, was an anomaly. It was very rare, and it was seen as something foreign to the tribe, because the tribe knew that morality and sympathy and empathy were traits that were required to live in harmony with nature, to be a productive member of the tribe. So the psychopaths, we referred to them as reptilian because of their indifferent attitudes to the suffering of any life forms. They're cold-blooded, if you will. They do not possess the ability to connect or feel or pick up physically the feeling and the connectedness of other beings. These psychopaths, they can extrapolate on how other people feel because they have recognized and they have learned and can repeat intellectually reasons for things. But they have no ability to identify with it. They cannot take that in. They cannot empathize with other people. These psychopaths oftentimes believe that they are a master race. They would try to dominate the tribes, and they would try to manipulate others, and they're very good at manipulating others. And in return, they would try to traumatize others. So tribes realized that even if they removed the blood-borne psychopath, the individual who could not learn empathy, this individual could not learn, even if they removed it, the consciousness of the tribe who were victims of this psychopath replicated and reproduced the effects of the psychopath, the trauma of the psychopath. These memories of psychopathy would persist in the tribe. They would echo through other individuals, and it required more healing and more effectual, more ways to heal the individual who was a survivor of this behavior. So, when the consciousness of human beings become increasingly traumatized, the tendency towards psychopathy increases with it. It is called secondary psychopathy. So the tribes noticed that the more traumatized they would become, the more of the echoes of the psychopath would persist in the tribe and even throughout the lineage of the tribe. So secondary psychopathy is a spectrum with which any human or tribal member could experience or exhibit due to unhealed traumatic events, abuse or neglect during the formative years, or unhealed traumatic events later in life. They knew that this is why the tribes increased and have such a huge proponent of healing trauma, and such a huge, the shaman possessed a huge ability to energetically heal trauma and to cure trauma deep within the psyche. And this is why many people today still practice shamanism or shamanistic behavior to heal trauma. This is why we still value exhaustion, physical exhaustion, psychedelic experience, because these allowed us to break through the walls of our consciousness, get deep within our psychological trauma, our experience, our memories, our lineage, our past lives. All of this. This is why we looked back, we reflected, we looked into ourselves. We had to be honest. We could not lie. We could not daydream that we lived in a fantasy land. We have to look at the trauma. We had to heal the trauma. There's a key to survival hidden within this trauma. So today we recognize that at least 1/3 of the human race or more is living in a traumatized state of mind. So the secondary psychopath is perpetuated by unhealed trauma. The 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 silver lining is that when a human being heals their secondary psychopathy and their trauma, they can actually be the greatest threat to defeat the blood-borne psychopath. With a healed conscience and awareness to what a true psychopath is, the human will be able to be aware of what a psychopath and what the behavior is and how to combat it. This is the true key, and the good news of psychopathy is that those who have been aware of it and have been victims of it can identify it and can look at it and can see it, and if they are brave enough, can face it and use their inner psychopath to combat the primary psychopath, which is the source of the trauma. And it must be noted that the primary psychopath can never care for humanity at all. There is only one way to rid it, and that is to remove the psychopath from the tribe or from existence altogether. Healing secondary psychopathy. The incredible pressure of survival encouraged these rites of passage that tested the young's ability to survive in difficult physical as well as moral circumstances, as a way of testing holistic integrity and development of the moral ego. Shamanism and moral education provided many tools which would give tribal members the ability to behave morally, rectify any wrongdoings externally in the world, and heal internally within their own conscience. The tribal society's moral education style could be seen as life or death. Oftentimes, if initiates lived to come of age without the ability to exhibit righteous moral behavior, they would be cast out of the tribe into the wild or put to death for their crimes. Seemingly extreme, these methods were tried and true for ensuring the survival of dozens or hundreds of generations to come. Secret societies. Elders would consult in private to discuss pressing security concerns. Secret societies were largely involved with the protection and betterment of the tribe. The concepts of secrets in the tribe were minimal, and it did not serve the tribe to withhold pertinent information. Secrets were not necessarily information that was hidden, but information that could not be taught to others due to a lack of willingness or readiness to understand. It's not that they formed these societies because they were trying to keep things secret, but rather maybe this information could not readily be understood by other members of the tribe. With survival reliant on adherence to tradition, people would meet in private to discuss new ideas, which, if implemented without regard, could disrupt the security or well-being of the tribe. It's safe to say that these secret societies back in the tribe were, maybe they were a little political, or I don't want to really emphasize political, but if you implemented new technology or new philosophy into a mythology of the tribe or stories of the tribe without thinking of the after effects, it could disrupt the youth, or it could disrupt the moral education. So they carefully thought about these things, and they carefully deliberately considered what they spoke of out. The shaman or the chief would speak of out into the ether of the tribe. So this also served as a means of protection against saboteurs within the tribe. Maybe there is a tribal member that could have been on the spectrum of psychopathy, or they were wanted to discuss the behavior of this individual without inflaming them. They would discuss what's going on amongst a group of elders or people who could differentiate and decide what to do with in a moral regard. So occultism, even with security measures and with the benevolent reasons for concealing this information, secret societies served as a method to conceal knowledge in order to either preserve it from enemies or to gain a power differential over others. It's my belief that occultism became a thing in these prehistoric societies and these prehistoric traditions where some societies or tribes would branch off and they would form their own nefarious or mysterious tribes with their own intentions. And this is what I think is the origination of true occultism and the concealing of knowledge. It would be considered like, you don't want a fellow tribe to understand your tactics of a war, or I wouldn't necessarily say war, but self-defense. You don't want other people. It's not my understanding that it was the true sense of war. I think largely these tribes would be practicing self-defense against maybe a tribe of psychopaths or secondary psychopaths. It goes both ways. So occultism is not bad and it is not good. It is simply the concealing of information from other people. The word occultism derives from the Latin adjectives occultus, which means hidden from sight. Occultus comes from the Latin verb occultare, to hide, to conceal, or to keep secret. The occult refers to bodies of knowledge that have been deliberately hidden from the eyes of others. This hidden knowledge, which has been so closely guarded by occultists, is neither good nor evil. It's not good or bad. It is just information. It is purely information of the knowledge of natural law, the laws of the universe, and the law of psychology, how our minds work. And this information can be used for evil. It can be used for good. It can be used for wrong behavior. It can be used for right behavior. So that is a key component to what the occult is and the information therein. The knowledge of if the knowledge of what we are and how we operate is hidden from us, we are ultimately under the control of those who do possess this knowledge. That's a key understanding. We must know this information if we do not want to be manipulated by other psychopathic occultists. So one of the first bits of occult information that societies would start to hide from each other, if let's say that they were nefarious or had their own intention, they wanted to disempower someone. I'm not saying that this is what all of the tribes were doing. It's my understanding that certain tribes would keep information. Let's say if they were a darker tribe, or their tribe operated on power rather than free will cooperation and right livelihood, they would hoard the knowledge of manifestation. So here we go again. This is one of the most deeply regarded of occult information. Manifestation begins with knowledge. That is available to the individual. All understanding and behavior relies on the availability and quality of information. So manifestation begins with thinking. It begins with our mind. What would we like to manifest? Either our thinking is going to be automatic and manipulated by those who are in these occult traditions. By limiting and controlling information, they could manipulate our decision making, our understanding, by manipulating the information available. This was the domino effect of manipulating the affected reality and manipulating the action of people. So the human brain is the central organ of a human's nervous system, which is responsible for receiving, processing, and coordinating information received from the body's sense organs. The tribes did know that it was the mind where consciousness was housed, was encased, enclosed, that the mind was a receiver. The mind was the central place of facilitation. A healthy human brain functions like a computer, which receives input, processes the information, and then outputs behavior. Like a computer, a human brain is programmable, and the quality of its output or behavior is dependent on the quality of its formatting, programming, operating system, input, and processing. So the ultimate behavior of the human being is dependent on its input. It's dependent on its processing power, on its ability to facilitate information, and the operating system which it is running. So the triune brain. This is a bit of occult information that many people still have not focused on or looked into enough. And this is how the triune brain operates. So we get into the neocortex, the limbic system, and the R complex. The reptilian complex, or the R complex, is at the base of the brain and brainstem in the basal ganglia. This is known to be the oldest part of the brain. We share these faculties with reptiles and birds and are associated with fear and material needs. So this is the where our nervous system all meets and generates or comes to in this oldest physical mentality, or this oldest processing power. The R complex is responsible for instinctive survival behaviors such as aggression, self-defense, dominance, territorial displays, and ritual displays. These are posturing. When we get tense, when we get scared or depressed, we will retreat into ourselves and hunch over. It's automatic. Our breathing gets shallow. And when we another ritual displays is when we're happy or ecstatic, we upright posture, and we zoom out and open up. We are opening. These are automatic behaviors that we do. So it regulates functions like our heart rate, it's our breathing, our digestion, blinking, physical stimulation. It's highly involved with fear response, such as the fight, flight, or freeze response. These are our automatic processes. Then we have the limbic brain, or mammalian brain. which is the hippocampus, amygdala, and hypothalamus. The limbic system is located above the R complex and is more interconnected with the cerebrum or neocortex. The limbic brain is responsible for the emotive difference between warm-blooded and cold-blooded beings and regulates functions like anger, sadness, joy, happiness, empathy, memory, compassion, and self-identity. So this is the animal brain. That's why we call it the mammalian brain. And this is the part in which, let's say, a psychopath is damaged. The bloodborne psychopath has this damaged. So that is why they operate in that previous survival methodology. Another bit of occult information, the psychopath would conceal their true being. They would not feel empathy. They have a damaged limbic system. So it serves that the psychopath would conceal this information. This is what I think is the beginning of the occult or the secret societies that had nefarious intent. So let's move forward. The neocortex is the largest and most complex part of the brain, located and surrounding the top of the brain. The frontal lobes of the human neocortex are exponentially more evolved than that of other mammals. This is where we can recall memories. We can search through our limbic and R complex. We can see them abstractly. We can control these other brain regions through our neocortex. We can solve problems, we can reflect, we can look into our memories, we can control ourselves. This is the wisdom part of the brain. This is how we speak. This is how we transformed from Neanderthals, which were not necessarily using large words and small noises to enunciate and break up sounds. Our primates could echo sounds and do long calls, but we couldn't break it down into small chunks and to small noises. This is how we assign language to sense data coming into our body and information outside of the world. So this is consciousness and the brain. Now we're breaking into what some people call the gender of the brain, the gender of consciousness. So the left brain largely coordinates thoughts, mathematics, individuality, language, sequencing, 1, 2, 3, 4. Objects, how we identify things around us. It's the literal and physical. This is how we identify things. It's how we do math and science, etc. The right brain largely coordinates creativity and imagination, compassion, collectivism, emotion, intuition, people. This is the zoomed out side of the brain. This is the part of the brain that sees the interconnectedness of things, whereas the left brain sees the finite, very zoomed in, small, sliced up pieces. And the right brain is more empathetic, and the left brain is more objective. It doesn't really, the left brain is more objective, the right brain is more subjective. Now it gets a little complicated, and many people will see how important this is in this next slide, is that if a human being's left brain hemisphere becomes chronically dominant, the R complex will take over executive function of the brain. The person will become ruled by selfishness, based desires, and develop a personality based in domination and control. So this type of brain imbalance, this left brain intellectual hyper left dominance, will bring people into what can be seen as a more psychopathic viewpoint. So if trauma exists within someone's mind, if they have a trauma from a male figure, from from a father figure, if you will, then they will become this hyper intellectual and ruler archetype, the enforcer archetype, the dominant, overtly outward protector figure. Uh, this trauma that we identify with the father, uh, they call the R complex the father because it is the oldest part. It's the father of awareness or intelligence, if you will. And if they are left brained, this R complex takes over. Um, and this is just a way of reverting into a defense mechanism. It's a defense mechanism so that if the brain hemispheres are damaged, that someone can still at least stay alive, essentially. That this is a survival mechanism. Now, inversely, if a human being's right brain hemisphere becomes chronically dominant, the limbic system will take over, executive function of the brain, and the person will become ruled by their own emotions and develop a personality based on submissiveness and naivete. So this is associated with the mother. This is the feminine symbolism. This is the emotive symbolism. So the opposite of the father traumatization, if someone is traumatized by a feminine role, by a being who was a feminine figure or had a feminine archetype, then if that trauma is not healed, they will identify with a victim or the submissive side of this trauma, and they will become naive and believing, and they will be submissive. And this is their trauma survival mechanism, is that they will, rather than the fight mechanism as before, as the left brain was a more fight symbolism, so the right brain is more of a flight or freeze response, and these people will run or freeze and hold still. And we all can identify, these are different types of people. Different types of people respond differently when they feel a threat. Some people will immediately fight back and try to defend themselves, or some people will freeze and just be still and hold still, and some people will run away. I think that gets the point across. Now, this is the healed being. The true intelligence can only manifest after the individual balances the intellectual and emotional poles of the neocortex. This is a symbolical marriage. This marriage of the sacred masculine and sacred feminine is known as the alchemical wedding. This is the marriage of the chemicals in your mind, known as the alchemical wedding. And true intelligence, as we see in the word, is intellect and gentia, or the gentle intellect and gentleness. This is the left and right brain. So when someone is unified in their left and right brain, when they feel threatened, they can overcome the trauma or fight, flight, or freeze response, and they can accurately delegate the degree to which they respond. And if they need to fight, they can choose the degree to which they fight back in a method that is appropriate. And if there is a true physical threat, then they can choose whether to fight, flight, or freeze. And if it is just an intellectual or emotional or verbal threat, then they can choose the degree to which they respond in these various ways, and they don't actually sink into a lower state of being. They can remain in their wisdom and keep their cool and respond appropriately. So dark occultism. The malicious secret societies would begin hoarding and concealing the knowledge I just talked about from those in their communities. So those with psychopathic tendencies would be would begin to form a class of learned individuals, and they would be eager to grow in their domination of others. They would try to exercise this power and the knowledge to take control of the tribe. So by hiding the information and controlling, manipulating, or concealing the input, the dark occultist could create a society that is unable to understand information or to make correct decisions. They could not have proper processing or behave in a moral capacity or give quality output. This is a truth that has been occurring since hundreds of thousands of years ago that we can see follow through to today. So dark occultists, basically, they would be rejects and psychopaths from other tribes. They would be kicked out or just leave. They would start to conspire and infiltrate every aspect of the tribal society and start forming their own tribes. It was very hard to infiltrate tribes back then. They would be tested. You would be tested. You would be tried. You would be outed very, very, very quickly in these tribes. So mostly they would form their own tribes and they would form their own cults, essentially, and they started performing miracles or tricks or magic, which would set themselves up for rightful priesthood and rightful leaders of others, and they would maybe convince other tribal members to leave and join their tribe and to join them as a more sophisticated or elegant or more learned tribe. And that was largely the dark occultist in these tribal societies. So methodically, they would use occult knowledge to create new poisoned mythologies, which obfuscate and invert laws and invert the gods. They would sow seeds of doubt in a communal tradition. The power of this secret ruling class was derived solely from those who are ignorant of the occulted information. All of their power lied in someone not knowing what they knew. So without the ability to make correct, moral, righteous decisions, humanity inevitably lived in a state of violent insanity, never learning the source of its suffering. This is the goal of the psychopathic dark occultist, is that they would manipulate the moral education of the beings around them, because as long as the beings around them were suffering, they would grow in power. The psychopathic disease of domination and betrayal is deeply rooted in the trauma of man's consciousness and is the oldest concept of evil. Science still cannot explain this anti-human behavior, yet a lot of ancient myths can provide deeper insight to what was going on and where the psychopath came from. Let's get into part 6, the mythos. So the study of human origins as told by prehistoric tribes, the first written texts, and even modern interpretations by scientists and scholars alike prove to be widely contradicting and even confusing to this day. So why is that? Why are these myths and histories so contradicting and perplexing? I think that the difficulty lies in the conflict and obfuscation between histories and myths. So many believe that both oral and written traditions of old are nothing but stories of ancient religious beliefs. This comes from a lack of knowledge of what a myth is. Myths are symbolic narratives or allegories that serve a fundamental purpose in human societies. Myths are not merely fictional tales, but combinations of human memories, archetypal patterns, historical truths, and moral lessons deeply rooted in the human psyche. Myths were likely not what, but how mankind thought of, interpreted, and remembers reality. Myths were not tales used for religious or entertainment purposes, but were actually a way man could convey collected wisdom and shared experiences of ancestors, providing knowledge to combat adversity, ensuring its best chances of survival. They used myths to prepare individuals for lessons and to teach about lessons and to give a moral education to their young so that way they can remember these myths in the future when they have troubling circumstances. Oral and written myths share many connections in both historical fact and spiritual truths. Let's examine some of the most important themes in human origin stories where myth and history converge. Creation myths. Records from tribal societies and humanity's first written texts around the world describe multiple divine beings descending from the sky to earth and creating humans out of the materials of earth mixed with the breath or blood of the gods. They often spoke about clay or mud or a clay vessel or a being or some type of material, flesh or mud that was on the earth, and they breathed into this or mixed the blood with it, and that's how the physical human was created. Many traditions use language that elaborately describes a physical presence of beings amongst humans. So the motive of these myths, they differ. So the first motive of human creation was that humans were created solely to serve and worship the gods, labor for the gods, and enact God's will on earth. This is one motive that is throughout human society, and it is the service-based motive of creation, is that we were here to worship and serve. The second motive of human creation was that humans were created to be caretakers of the earth and evolve alongside the gods and align with the force of life and evolution. It was less worship based and less service to God's sake and more service to the truth, service to evolution, service to growth, and a companionship and a relationship to the gods, which allowed humans to grow with the gods and evolve with the gods. So societies throughout the world attribute their own existence, wisdom, and technology to divine beings, which imparted knowledge among the people of Earth. Oral and literate societies alike did not take credit for their own advancements, but gave gods or spirits the credits. This is a truism throughout all of the mythology, is that knowledge and technology was a gift from the gods. A lot of times they said that the gods or spirits gave this to them. Humanity's oldest stories describe the gods teaching humanity of natural law, genealogy, magic, sorcery, deception, war, slavery, literature, psychology, chemistry, astrology, geometry, art, etc. Again, the gods taught them these things. Oftentimes they came down and taught them these things. Yes, I do understand that this was an evolution of knowledge. I'm not saying that I actually believe that there were gods who came down physically. I'm not leaving that out, but I am trying to keep this presentation as simple as possible for as many people to grasp, given the facts of these stories. Offerings. The transmission of knowledge and wisdom from the gods to humans in many traditions was often transactional. In order to receive good harvests, protection, or knowledge from any god, there must be an offering made, such as worship, sacrifice, labor, devotion, or shrines, which I guess could be labor. This is very symbolic of what we talked about previously, is that these tribes, they must behave properly. An offering or a sacrifice was the putting off of gratification. They would sacrifice present gratification for future harmony. and this was symbolic. However, later on, the sacrifice became flesh and physical, and it became more of a physical sacrifice rather than a spiritual sacrifice. We can get into that a little more. So the history of sacrifice dates back to the oldest spiritual traditions. At the center point between winter and spring during the spring equinox, ancient tribes and cults would provide sacrifices to their gods. These offerings historically have been both symbolic and literal. Ancient cults would often spill blood upon Earth's soil in spring to ensure a bountiful harvest in the fall. A common misunderstood symbolism in these texts is that it was vague whether they would sacrifice literal animals or if it was a symbolical reference to a zodiacal sacrifice, like the sacrifice of the bull or the ram, are two astrological symbols which could have been a meaning for sacrificing the lower animal instincts for a higher harvest of wisdom and knowledge. It doesn't necessarily mean that the tribes would sacrifice blood. However, the way that I understand it was that these moral tribes and these tribes who valued moral education, it was a symbolic sacrifice of the self and the lower animal instincts. And I think that the cults who were psychopathic or dark occultists, they might have been sacrificing, doing actual bloodletting of various beings. And whether that worked or not is up to speculation, and that is for a later topic. The serpent. Reptile and serpent symbolism exists throughout most every ancient and prehistoric mythology. The serpent often represents knowledge and wisdom without the polarity of emotion. I think that the serpent is misinterpreted largely by modern people. However, it does allude to what we talked about with the psychopath, and I don't think that that can be left out. However, pure wisdom in its natural form is the ability to do what is right regardless of how you feel about it. So the serpent can be misinterpreted and was often the ancient symbol for the Christ figure, and the serpent was worshipped before Christ in positive attributes. I'm not going to harp on that too much. However, pure wisdom, doing what is right, making right and moral decisions, is done regardless of how we feel about it. What is right should be done regardless of if we think that we feel good or it sucks to do. The messenger. Dozens of societies from all over the globe tell of a human bird or human fish-like being arriving from water and teaching mankind about the science of natural laws and workings of the human psyche. The messenger comes when humanity is forming societies and forming maybe small groups of communities, and this messenger came as a teacher. And the teachings of this being, if you look into it, they rest at the foundation of every institution known to man. This information was regarded to be the most secret of all information. This being is regarded as Thoth, the messenger, the scribe of the gods, Moses, and Hermes Trismegistus. This being is speculated as being, if we can think about it this way, is that this being came from the water, like all life we know came from the water. So maybe this was a species or a symbol for an intelligence that came from a very remote antiquity, maybe before cataclysms or before a flood. This being was known as Oannes, and these beings were known as the magicians or the teachers of old. Humanity's first written historical accounts, now regarded as myths, document this entity as the messenger of the gods. Myths often describe divine beings as dual-natured, exhibiting both the spread of knowledge and deception. A peculiar feature of these gods was human or even childlike behaviors, manipulating or deceiving humans for their own gain. So these beings often have dual natures. You have dual natures of the gods being trickster, or sharing good information, or deceiving others, and this is shown just by the nature of a god, is that a god has information that humans cannot understand. So there was often comedy, and they would often laugh at the naivety or fallibility of humans, and they would be seen as manipulating humans for their own gain. If people are being honest with themselves, this is what a lot of the gods were portrayed as. Now, we can often attribute these gods as being manipulated by humans because we are humans telling the stories. However, these gods were often seen as external, and many tribes and many societies and civilizations would tell of these gods in the same way throughout the world, even though hypothetically their tribes or societies or civilizations were not connected by any known means of communication. So the fall myths. Many traditions throughout the world describe mankind's ascent into a period of advanced consciousness and technology, followed by the spoiling of moral integrity and falling out of grace with the gods, descending into immorality and ignorance. This is a worldwide global trend for mythology, and you don't have to look very far to see it everywhere. So the cataclysm worldwide, again, humanity's disobedience to the gods and forgetting tradition bring about a divine retribution. This was a huge cataclysm that the gods become angry and displeased with humanity, or spirits were very displeased with humanity, and they sent a cataclysm, floods, fires, earthquakes, etc., to wipe out the scourge of humanity. The gods inform either a chosen human or their offspring that a terrible cataclysm will be sent to humanity to cleanse the earth of the entire species, said to be a noisy abomination. The gods are said to have left the earth during this time. So the hero or savior weathers the storm with everything needed to repopulate the earth and reinstate civilization according to God's will. So there we go. The gods left this planet, and they left this chosen individual, or the hero, to repopulate the earth according to what the gods wanted, and according to what the gods' true intention for our creation was. So, part 7, pre-civilization. The beginning of civilization is shrouded in mystery. Man's first texts, archaeology and mythology, is often contradictory and converging. Humanity was building large megalithic temples before 11,500 years ago, apparently utilizing a knowledge and understanding of architecture and engineering which modern humans are yet to realize. You have Göbekli Tepe, 11,500 years ago, roughly. Göbekli Tepe exhibits many inscriptions of known zodiacal animal constellations and star systems. Many believe knowledge of the precession of the equinox began tens of thousands of years ago, before it is currently attributed. In order to know of the precession of the equinox at, let's say, 10,000 years ago, they had to have been studying this for the time frame of the precession, at least 26,000 years. So let's say 36,000 years ago, maybe more, most likely more, because you have to form a pattern. You can't study it for 10,000 years and assume that it's going to be the same for 26,000 years. And you can't assume that it's going to be however long, because you have to study it in its full cycle, which is the cycle of the zodiac, preceding itself You can look into the precession of the equinox, which is essentially the sun goes around the zodiac every year. Every 26,000 years, the sun is going in the other direction. Communities such as Catalhoyuk were home to up to 10,000 people at a given period and contained various cohesive tribes. This one community lasted for 1,600 years with a lack of clear social hierarchy or governance. Catalhoyuk exhibited sophisticated trade networks, copper jewelry, non-local obsidian blades, and specialized tradespeople and a deep spiritual relationship with nature. This tribe was sophisticated, and this community rather, or depending on what you might want to call civilization, this existed for 1,600 years, and the walls are all touching. Many people speculate as a defense mechanism to protect against enemies or animals from being able to find easy ways inside. A lot of their buildings were connected through ladders on the top of the building. So now we're getting into the Ubaid period, between 8,500 and 5,500 years ago, known as the Ubaid. In ancient Mesopotamia, humanity makes more strides in trade, agriculture, technology, pottery, some metallurgy, and urbanization. Mainstream archaeology says that Eridu was the earliest city in the world 7,400 years ago. However, one of mankind's first written manuscripts, called the Sumerian King's List, makes Eridu a city thousands of years before current dating. The Sumerian King's List documents a flood, and this flood was after the establishment of Eridu. Modern science and modern archaeology, or mainstream archaeology and mainstream science, they do not notice a flood or document a flood after these times. That's not for us to discuss right now. However, it is very conflicting trying to study these texts, because the Sumerian King's List may have some interesting time frames for how they portrayed the origination of Eridu. However, it seems and appears to be a very objective text, or like a historical document. The city of Eridu is developed near two freshwater rivers, with the settlers heavily dependent on animal domestication and fishing. Sumerian texts say that their patron god Enki founded this first city and built its temple there for the worship and learning. Eridu is known for being the first city with its rich trade networks, lasting establishment, crop irrigation channels, and worship to the god Enki. This period marks the era of the devout shepherd priests of old. Something peculiar begins to take place, leading into the dawn of early civilization. Something evil threatens the shepherd's flock. Even the shepherd is yet to understand this change. According to ancient accounts, a well-educated and charming priest appears among the people of Eridu and claims that the Sumerian gods Anu, Enki, and Enlil had named him Alulim. He claims that the gods appointed him to be a shepherd of men among the people of Eridu. Alulim announces that the gods put both capital offense and sin in his hand. Since the gods put capital offense and sin into the hands of Alulim, he believed he could freely choose what right and wrong behavior was, as well as become exempt from the punishment of wrong behavior. Alulim would become the first priest king, claiming to have been put on earth as an intermediary between man and their god, claiming also to be a descendant of the gods themselves, aka authority in the flesh. So this being or person said that he was the arbiter of truth, and the gods left him to be a shepherd of men who would lead the flock of humanity. This was an inversion of the previous order, where only God or natural law is king. There were no kings before this. This is the establishment of the divine right or kingship, of someone's proclaiming to other people that they are in charge. The new priest king announcing the new religion, performing miracles and rituals, which distinguishes himself as a divinely appointed leader and is placed in charge of the waterways, storage, and division of grain, as well as delegated job hierarchies among the people of Eridu. This new king instructs the people of Eridu to erect a temple for the worship of the god Enki, where offerings and sacrifices were given. So here he is. He establishes the temple, and he tells people that we need a temple, and you need to start placing your offerings there. It can no longer be done in your home. It needs to be done in the temple. We need to erect a shrine, etc. This is when society started to become stratified, and we have a priest, leader, king, person, and their appointed individuals who were in charge of the temple and orchestrating what would be going on in them. Okay, part 7, the old world. So 6,000 years ago in Uruk, Mesopotamia, a large civilization begins to appear and immediately starts taking gigantic leaps in the fields of government, religion. They have shopping centers, social stratification, finance, a lot of metallurgy. We're heading from the Copper Age into the Bronze Age, warfare, slavery, etc., marking an extremely anomalous growth in what we see as modern civilization. So it begins in Uruk with this city-state, and other places start to form around this and just after it, all over the world. This is the Uruk phenomenon is what people call it, because within a few hundred years, societies and communities start civilizing, as we call it, and forming civilizations with sophisticated governments and religions and trade systems. Of all the main components of what people call civilization, it can actually be broken into just 3 institutions: religion, money, and government. One thing that I didn't put in this slide was that it's actually the beginning of sophisticated slave trade. It was no longer hostages or small tribal ransom. This was actual slave operations, slave trade. And they actually called it people herding, is a trope that they used in the Sumerian texts that we look back, and it was the herding of people, which goes along with the dissension of the divine right of the shepherd of men. So the trinity of civilization. We have religion. It's an organized system of belief which is approved by the government, used to unite its believers in thought and ultimately action. The first king, who announced himself to be the king, he said we all have to have the same religion if we want to work cohesively. We have to abide by a system of belief. And since I am in charge and I am exercising this divine right, I'm going to show you what the gods want of you. Money was an organized system of exchange approved by the religion and government institutions to obfuscate value. This was now whether you believe it's a type of trade, what it did serve as was the value, the proxy for value. It was a placeholder for trade. And then you have government. This is the trinity of civilization. Everyone knows government is the organized physical control over the people and goods within a state according to its doctrine, according to its religion, its principles, if you want to call it that. Let's get into early civilizational religion. So spiritual leaders all over Mesopotamia began claiming that they are chosen by God, or are even the offspring of the gods, giving them the authority to decide what a capital offense or sin was. The first government was organized religion. Wielding knowledge of natural law and psychology, the priest kings would spread their myths of divine appointment and royal bloodlines, along with performing magical trickery to convince others of their authority to rule. The dark distortion of existing tribal mythology replaced competent leaders and sovereign individuals with a master con man who was self-proclaimed God, who was a self-proclaimed God and demanded to be seen as a master. This can't be emphasized enough, is that with all of the skills of managerial skills that these people had, they proclaimed themselves to be gods. And in many of these texts, going back, they claim to be the ruler of the four corner of the earths and the holder of destinies. And these people, in some documents, and historians would say, oh, they didn't actually believe themselves to be a god. However, in the texts and in the documents, in the inscriptions of the seals or steles, they would call themselves the leader of the free world, essentially. So obedience to the king or the government or the religion was equated to devotion and worship of God itself. This person was a viceroy or a vicar. They stood in the place of God. They were here while the gods were gone. The priest-king ruling class, with a new form of literature, began creating religions using archetypal, astrological, anatomical, animistic, and allegorical myths to conceal and obfuscate existing spiritual information, as well as exploit the psychology of mankind to perform the bidding of authority figures. They used myths, and they took myths and the psychology, and they wielded it to fit their bidding, to fit their kingship, to fit their story, to fit his story of the people, and give the reasons why that these kings were the rightful leaders and master of all destiny of the people. The reason for vague ciphered scripture was to leave room for various interpretations which suit the authorities' needs at any given time or place. Using layered, codified texts could simultaneously show divine inspiration, demanding obedience to the God's word in the minds of slaves, yet also convey deep spiritual truths to the initiated elect. So they use codes which were totally confusing to people, and they didn't make sense in any literal shape or any historical shape, but they served to wipe away the reason or logical mindset of the people and allow them to be placed in a subservient mindset, who would just believe the most negligent against science anomalies or miracles. But to the elect priests, they read them in the spiritual, allegorical manner that they should be, and they could get the proper truths from them. The religious and moral belief in authority vested in a singular individuals served as the foundation and source of power for governments around the entirety of the old world, and lies at the core of ancient civilizations. So there were societies before Uruk and Babylon, Sumeria, Egypt, the Aztec, the Mayan civilizations, the Chinese civilizations. However, we don't document these 1600-year civilizations. Do you know why? It's my understanding that we don't document them because they don't account for slavery. There was no people herding. There was no slavery. The reason why we call Babylon and Egypt civilization is because they possessed slaves. There was a slave trade. So we're attributing civilization with the trade of slaves. You can take this to the bank. Maybe you disagree. I think if you're honest with yourself and you look into this, that you will see that I'm being truthful in that assessment. This concept of authority is a religious claim that specific individuals have an exclusive access to rights which others can never perform unless authorized by an approved authority figure, i.e., a god, king, or a priest. This is the belief system which justified acts of evil, perpetuated slavery throughout the history of mankind. This is religious authority. And we have money. The ruling class introduced an approved system of value to all aspects of civilization. Life itself was reduced to a determined monetary value set by the authorities. An individual's opportunities and freedom would be determined not only by the usefulness they are to the authorities, but also based on their financial status. They had to pay their way out of fines. They had to this was often an eye for an eye. So anything that, if they stole any fine or betrayal, just like our society, they had to pay it back with money. And if you were reduced to a slave, if you were rich and reduced to a slave, then it became very hard to elevate yourself out of slavery and work your way up, because these people were all considered slaves, everyone. The value of life was based on its worthiness to the king and priest class. However, in Uruk, all members of society could have rights removed from them at any point, making them all subject to the rulership of the king. So the king was a god, and he could essentially, no matter where you were at on the hierarchy, maybe all the way up to the people right next to the king, based off their lineage. Anyone who wasn't part of their lineage could have their rights removed immediately. Early text refers to both god worshippers and humans and human chattel as slaves. Much of humanity's first legal code was used to delegate procedures and rules concerning human slave trades, called people herding. So you look at the Code of Hammurabi. We think that this is the first most sophisticated law codes, the legal codes. And what you see when you look at it is all about slave. There's it's not only slave trade, but the rights of the king or god the rights of the king were derived all from the gods. Every time. There's 20 references in the Code of Hammurabi to Hammurabi getting his powers given by God, or his divine grace and anointment by the gods. The people of Uruk believed the established system of exchange was simply for ease of trading. However, upon closer inspection, this provided people with the proper emotional desperation to live in a fight-or-flight scarcity mindset, living from a material consciousness, thus easily dominated. So what does this look like? This looks like what we talked about before, is the manipulation of our fight or flight response, or scarcity mindset. And these people could have maybe it's an assumption that these people assumed that this trade system was for trading. And maybe they actually knew more than what we think they knew, and this was just a means for trade. Maybe they knew that their life had value, and it had a monetary ascription to it. Let's get into government. If magic tricks and mythology did not convince a neighboring community to join the civilized world to be ruled over, the priest kings would declare war on them and spread myths of their savagery and wicked gods as an excuse for conquest and domination. What does this sound like? This is, if you look into it, you see all the historical documents of Sumer when they were battling. This was because the neighboring societies were savages, and they needed to get some freedom injected into them. Conquest served as a way of erasing the tribal way of life and eliminating the knowledge of shamanism, which was antithetical to the state's rule. This is conquest. This is the epitome of conquest. And the king or the government would see people evading his domination, And they said, no, 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 we need to increase our resources, increase our power, increase our trade. We can't have people outside of our system. They must be in our system. So, to increase territory and increase the power of priest kings, neighboring states would claim that the gods were fighting as an excuse to rally ignorant believers or slaves. And oftentimes the warriors were the slaves. Why would they waste their production of their own goods? They wouldn't. The warriors were all slaves, and whether you were competent or frail or whatever, you would be assigned a position as a fighter. A lot of people believe naively that tribes were just warring with themselves. However, you don't get actual war and total domination where you're burning like full scale attacks until you get into this era. So members of conquered states and tribes would be killed or turned into chattel slaves. Government was a system of bodily and physical control which is backed by the threats and acts of violence of the authorities. Slaves of government complied with its domination due to a naive belief of its godly necessity as well as the fear of punishment. So following the Sumerian shepherd priest king mythology, the civilian believes that the king or government is the divine shepherd in charge of domesticating, protecting, feeding, breeding, selling, punishing, and culling the flock called humanity. The king or government is the shepherd of men. The civilian is likened to the sheep animal. A civilian is an individual who believes that the ownership and slavery of sentient beings is a necessary and even beneficial condition for humanity. So let's get into the New World. As we see, the trinity of civilization is religion, money, and government. Is this any different from what we see as the New World? No. So nothing has changed, as you can tell. Same funny hat, same currency, and the same enforcement of laws. What do we call this? What is this trinity? This, everyone, is called the Trinity of Mind Control. This is how we control the thoughts, emotions, and actions of other beings. So here we have the Old World Order, where the priest is in charge up top. You have the government down below. They all need their freedom bucks right in the middle, at the heart of things, right in the middle. And let's take a look at the New World Order, where instead of one person in charge, it's just a handful. And money and religion is still at the heart of things. This is the New World Order. Money should all three of those should be at the top. I should have put all three of them at the top. This is called slavery, where other beings get to rule over other beings. The same methods of controlling humanity in the beginning of civilization are the same methods still used to this day. Religion, money, and government is still the unholy trinity of mind control used to perpetuate modern slavery. Thousands of years ago, mankind was willfully convinced, deceived, and coerced to naively give up its freedom and exit the natural world for the civilized religion of statism. Statism is a psychopathic belief system where some beings have more rights than others. Truth has been replaced with authority. Karma has been replaced with man. Civilization is the process of trading one's own natural personal responsibility to behave righteously in exchange for a hall pass from the gods called the state. Any behavior is permitted as long as it is legal in the state's eyes. Statists are given safety and protection by wearing an imaginary badge of virtue that identifies them as complicit with their own enslavement. Civilians are seen as righteous, courageous, and virtuous for relinquishing their freedom to the slave master called government. Emotional slavery. The true God worshipped at every level of the present human hierarchy is money. All institutions and religions in today's world are bought and paid for by this heart control method, which has served to invert the human care for wisdom and lower it to a worship of comfort and status. Humanity no longer needs whips or chains to remain enslaved. After thousands of years of mental, emotional, and physical traumatization, our hearts have been corrupted enough to remain enslaved as long as we receive our freedom credits. Present-day humanity has more possibilities for mental, emotional, and physical freedom than ever before, yet still remain as a mental prisoner bound by the chains of their ignorance, apathy, and cowardice. Ancient religion laid the foundation for all mind control methodologies. It did not begin with MK Ultra, everyone. It began in the prehistoric past, probably hundreds of thousands of years ago. Still being utilized to bind the mind in a perpetual state of ignorance, blind belief, and obedience and worship of any authority figure. Religion is the true blue pill, making one docile, subservient, and patiently await a savior to come rescue humanity from all of its self-imposed evil and to punish the alleged wrongdoers. We're going to be waiting for a long time. Let's get to the physical enslavement called government, which still exists for now as the third option for domination and physical control when deception, manipulation, religion, emotional manipulation, and coercion do not work. Government is still perceived as a necessary savior and father figure for traumatized individuals, just like in Babylon. Government, which means mind control, government, mind control, whether human or technological, will always be an immoral justification of violence due to its innate delusion of authority. Authority is the exact excuse needed to justify the psychopathic enslavement of the human race. So where are we now? 99% of humans are still unaware of the true purpose of governance, religion, and finance. Humans still actively engage in barbaric acts of terrorism, torture, warfare, and genocide on the behalf of these religions. Because humanity has remained totally ignorant to the natural laws governing morality and consciousness for thousands of years, the entire planet is still currently dominated by the same psychopathic priest class which invented the ancient systems of control described above. The present mythology of humanity can be viewed as the tragedy of all tragedies. Caught in severe delusion, most humans ignorantly believe that they are moral, while at the same time participating in and remaining silent to the predation and slavery exterminating their own species at their own hands. Humanity is in its final throes, begging in vain for a savior to rescue them. The dark occult ruling class will soon no longer need physical government to do their dirty work. As they systematically throw national governments under the bus, creating chaos worldwide, they will increase global technological and financial control of the people of Earth. Such as the cataclysms casted to the sinful Earth by the angry gods of old, orchestrated global catastrophes like nuclear warfare, financial collapse, blackouts, terrorism, bioweapons, and natural disasters linger in the distance as a precursor for another 1,000-year reign of unrelenting technological slavery. The mental enslavement of humanity is so severe that such cataclysms need only to exist in the minds and hearts of humanity in order to take their toll as if manifest. With such little time left and Earth at peak moral ignorance, humanity must undergo a rapid change in consciousness or accept the brutal enslavement of all future generations. In God they trust. All of these psychopathic occult members will do anything authority figures tell them to. They do not know that they will be held accountable for their own actions in the end. If you don't believe this, you can look into the studies. Up to 90% of people will do anything that they are told to, including death and torture. These traitors who do the violent bidding of those who feed them their money naively believe that they are securing a life for themselves in the new world. but will immediately be disposed of the instant their work is no longer needed by their technocratic, dark occult overlords. Following procedure, the rules, and orders has been the excuse that justifies every evil mass theft that takes place in this world. When will we say no? This mental prison was built by the same humans enslaved by it, and ultimately it belongs to them to dismantle. The true divide of humanity is that some people belong, a very small, less than 1% of people belong to the tribe of natural law, where truth is authority. They sacrifice their time, their attention, and their animal desires for wisdom and harmony with natural law. Or some people, most of them, are in the cult of man's law, where man is authority, and we get to vote on our rights. They sacrifice life for indulgence of the self and the domination over nature. This divide of people involves a group of individuals which find moral behavior to be the crucial linchpin that ensures freedom and evolution. Cult of man's law is a group of beings who ignorantly deny moral law. They seek short-term power by the subjugation of other sentient beings. They deny or conceal natural law and psychology from others to ensure slavery persists, maintaining their own control of other beings. Let's get into the way out. All attempts to run away from the present human condition are in vain, as the problems we face are manifested from the mind. The true solution rests in the majority of humans facing the darkest aspects and tyrannical versions of their consciousness that influence their behavior unknowingly. Essentially, facing our shadow, which has been exploited and enlarged by the dark occult mind control. Humanity must learn the truth and begin to take massive, rapid action to learn the occulted knowledge of natural law and how the human mind operates. By seeking in themselves and in the world around them, they have to learn that they have been ignorant to the slavery of their own mind. We must feel the truth, and it hurts. When learning the truth, a person needs to deeply interact with, feel, embody, realize, and actualize the truth. In the deepest recesses of the human consciousness, the truth echoes as a whispering voice that harmonizes with natural law. After feeling the burden of one's own participation in the current system of slavery, we are compelled to say, I was wrong. We must take responsibility. When a person sees and feels that they are held accountable for every decision they do and do not make, the responsibility for moral behavior is planted firmly at their feet. We must all take on the duty to perform right action, no matter how difficult. After learning the truth and beginning to heal our trauma, humanity must begin sounding the alarm and speak on a global scale regarding the ongoing enslavement of the human race. Humanity must use its technology while it still can to reach the minds of as many people as possible. Humanity must become unapologetically righteous. If we wish to be heard and understood clearly, we must never pretend to not know the truth in order to spare another person's feelings or even avoid death. A war is being waged on the truth, and cowardice is a lie. Courage is the required trait of every hero and every myth known to man, and provides the luck which every main character needs to survive. The law rewards the courageous. Even death cannot kill the courageous individual. We must be the leader. Humanity must abandon guru culture and empower themselves to be their own way shower in their own life. It's time to step forward and remove our blind faith and trust in officials or authority figures which serve to discredit the truly empowered individuals. We must be willing to say, I am the true teacher. I am the true shaman. I am the true general. I am true law enforcement. I am the true warrior. I am the true doctor. I am the true scientist. I am the true media. I am the banker. I am the doctor. We can't export our roles. Every human has a priority and a responsibility to be their own way shower. Stop copping out and stop giving up your responsibility to be a responsible person. I can say all of these phrases and know it. I am a scientist. I am a doctor. I'm not afraid to admit that. And I'm not afraid to say it. I am not afraid to point to the truth. We must take back the education of our young, and it is an absolute requirement to ensure the survival of our species. We should rather allow our families to suffer temporary discomfort than abandon our children to the jaws of the modern schooling systems backed by the state. We all know what these systems do. Now that we have a proper education of where these institutions come from, there's no reason to leave our children there. Parents should educate their young to see the value in harmonizing themselves with natural law. Natural law should be harmonized with due to the individual's love for truth more than it should be obeyed out of the fear of punishment. Most of humanity is running from punishment rather than acting out of a love for truth. Moral education in the formative years is the only option for a peaceful society. The young deserve to be treated with respect as sovereign individuals whose bodies belong to themselves and are not the property of any authority which shouts, "Because I said so." The non-aggression principle. Do not engage in violence. No human may immorally support, cooperate with, or initiate the non-rightful use of physical power to coerce, constrain, or compel the rightful behavior or free will choice of another sentient being. This is called wrong behavior. This is the essence of violence. It is a violation of someone's rights. We must cease involvement. This includes activities that participate and comply with those who initiate the non-rightful use of physical power to coerce, constrain, or compel the rightful behavior or free will choice of another sentient being. Stop participating with slavery. Stop doing behaviors that contribute to theft. Stop being stolen from. Stop allowing others to steal from you and your neighbors. Stop promoting the theft of your neighbors and your brothers and sisters. Do unto others as you would have done unto you. The self-defense principle means that sentient beings are free and possess the inherent right to use whatever force necessary to defend themselves from violence conducted upon them by any individual or individuals, even if those individuals make the violent delusional claim of being an authority. This is a bitter truth to swallow. Authority doesn't give you any more rights than anyone else. It is a delusional claim and a religious belief system. Everyone has the right to defend themselves. I have the right to defend myself and be freely unaccosted and travel freely and move across this earth freely without being stolen from. And anyone who does not understand that or believe that has lost their rights. Those beings who support, cooperate with, or help others initiate the non-righteous threat or use of physical force or power to violate the free will behavior of other human beings immediately forfeit their rights to moral self-defense. If you initiate violence on someone, you lose your right. You immediately lose your right to be in the right. You are no longer in the right if you aid and abet violence. You are in the wrong. Therefore, whoever uses force to defend themselves has the rightful ability to do so. Force is in harmony with natural law. It is in moral self-defense and maintains and preserves rights. It is always rightful to defend yourself. Violence is a violation of natural law. It is immoral offense. It is the theft of rights, and it is always wrong. If the human race truly knew and understood the information conveyed in this presentation, it would swallow its pride and immediately cease involvement with tyrannical systems of control and begin investing every bit of time and attention to educate others. Does humanity have enough mental, moral, or physical willpower left to even imagine a world that is not fueled by perpetual slave labor? What does a world without slavery look like? When one begins to dilute their poison worldview and loosen their mental shackles, an inescapable ultimate reality becomes visible to them. The true purpose of natural law is freedom. Natural law serves as the evolutionary caretaker, steering consciousness towards higher degrees of freedom. So why does natural law steer us towards freedom? Because freedom is the ultimate expression of love. When one aligns their will with natural law, they are aligning themselves with the ultimate creative force of the universe, care. Care is the true dynamic which is used to steer our consciousness away from fear and ignorance towards truth, self-ownership, self-love, and freedom, creating a world with true order. No masters and no slaves. So what is the true state of no masters and no slaves? It's anarchy. The true and natural order is anarchy. Anarchy means without masters, therefore without slaves. Anarchy manifested on earth is true human equality. Anarchy means no slavery and freedom. Anarchy is the possibility of order and chaos. Statism is the guarantee of chaos. Will you choose to perpetuate a system of masters and slaves? Or will you dare to envision, create, and defend a society where we are all truly equal, not by decree, but by choice? Now is the time for humanity to stand up for true human equality. The future is not written, it is still in our hands. What will your choice be? Thank you, everyone. This has been a presentation by myself, Aaron Butler. If you find this information valuable, please consider donating to the link below. Please consider subscribing to my channels. Thank you for going with me on this journey, and I hope to see you and interact with you in later videos.